One of the oldest civilizations in the world, yet never truly stable. That is not a small contradiction, but a paradox that has lasted for thousands of years. When we look back at history, we often assume that anything that endures must be solid, unshakable, almost permanent. But Iran challenges that idea completely. This is a land that has witnessed the rise of powerful empires, the collapse of seemingly invincible dynasties, waves of conquest, revolutions, and repeated rebirths that seem almost impossible. It did not survive because it was stable. It survived because it was constantly changing. Imagine standing among the ruins of Persepolis, massive stone columns, intricately carved staircases, once the heart of one of the most powerful empires in the ancient world. Everything around you suggests permanence, as if this place once defined the order of the world itself. And yet, in what is only a brief moment in the scale of history, it all turned into ruins. Now shift forward to modern Tehran, and you encounter something entirely different. A crowded, restless, energetic city, filled with tension, where the past and present do not exist separately, but overlap, creating a feeling that is both familiar and deeply conflicted. What is remarkable is that despite countless invasions, transformations, and redefinitions, Iran has never truly disappeared. It did not fade away like many other civilizations, leaving only traces behind. Instead, it continuously reshaped itself, adapted, and persisted in new forms. At times it was a vast empire, at other times a modern nation struggling with internal contradictions. But there has always been something consistent beneath the surface, something difficult to define, yet impossible to ignore. So, what is Iran really? Is it simply a country, with borders, a government, and a political system? Or is it an idea? A deeper identity that has survived across centuries through conquest, collapse, and change. And if it is an idea, what has allowed it to endure when so many others have disappeared? To understand that, we need to go back to the beginning, not just to see what happened, but to understand how a civilization can fall again and again and still continue to exist. To understand Iran, we cannot begin with a modern map or the idea of a nation-state as we know it today. We have to go back thousands of years, to a time when power was not defined by fixed borders, but by the ability to control people and impose order. It was in this context that the Persian Empire, the Achaemenid Empire, emerged as an entirely new model of how the world could be organized. Cyrus the Great was not just a conqueror, but a figure who redefined the nature of power. Instead of ruling through destruction and forced assimilation, he allowed conquered peoples to preserve their cultures and religions. This created a more stable system, where authority relied not only on fear, but also on acceptance. As a result, the empire expanded rapidly, becoming one of the first and largest empires in history, stretching from the Middle East to Egypt and beyond. At the center of this power stood Persepolis, not merely a city, but a symbol of a new order. Its massive stone columns, intricate reliefs, and the processions of envoys from across the empire bringing tribute all conveyed a clear message. This was the center of a diverse world, unified under a single system. But the most important aspect was not its size or architecture. It was how the empire was imagined. Iran was not born as a nation with fixed borders, but as an empire, a vast, flexible, and constantly evolving structure. And from that very beginning, one thing becomes clear. Iran has endured not because it remained unchanged, but because it has always adapted in order to survive. At the core of Iran's long history lies something far more enduring than any empire or political system, a deep cultural identity that has survived repeated waves of conquest, collapse, and transformation. While dynasties rose and fell, while rulers changed and borders shifted, this underlying identity remained remarkably persistent. It was not tied to a single government or moment in time, but to a shared sense of language, tradition, and worldview that continued to define what it meant to be Persian, even as the surface of history constantly changed. One of the most striking examples of this resilience is the survival of Persian culture after the Arab conquest in the 7th century. Although the region was absorbed into the Islamic world and adopted a new religion, the Persian language did not disappear. Instead, it adapted, incorporating Arabic elements while maintaining its own structure and literary tradition. Over time, Persian re-emerged not only as a spoken language, but as a major cultural and intellectual force, producing poetry, philosophy, and scholarship that would influence much of the Islamic world. Religion, too, became part of this evolving identity. From the ancient roots of Zoroastrianism to the later adoption of Islam, particularly Shia Islam, belief systems changed, but they were often reinterpreted through a distinctly Persian lens. Rather than erasing what came before, each transformation added another layer, creating a complex and deeply rooted cultural continuity. This ability to absorb external influences while preserving an internal coherence became one of the defining characteristics of Iran. What makes this identity especially powerful is that it does not depend on political stability. Empires collapsed, foreign powers took control, and entire systems were replaced, yet the cultural foundation persisted. It existed in language, in literature, in customs, and in the collective memory of the people. In this sense, Iran was never defined solely by who ruled it, but by a deeper continuity that existed beneath the surface of power. This is why Iran could be conquered, transformed, and reshaped, yet never truly erased. Its identity was not fragile or fixed, but flexible and enduring, capable of evolving without losing itself. And it is this core, more than any empire or government, that explains how Iran has remained recognizable across centuries of change. The history of Iran is not a straight line of steady progress, but a series of ruptures, moments when everything seems to end, only to begin again in a completely different form. These are not gradual changes, but true resets, when entire systems stop functioning and are forced to give way. And each time that happens, Iran does not disappear, it is reborn. Then one day, everything changed. In the 7th century, the Arab conquest swept across the Persian lands, bringing down the Achaemenid Empire, one of the oldest and most established power structures of its time. An entire world came to an end. Zoroastrianism declined, the political system collapsed, and a new order, Islam, began to replace it. From the outside, this looked like the end of ancient Persia. But the reality was different. Iran did not vanish, it adapted. The Persian language survived. Its culture was not erased, but absorbed into the Islamic world. And over time, it re-emerged as a major intellectual and cultural force. Once again, Iran changed in order to continue. But that was not the only time. Centuries later, another turning point emerged. And this time, Iran did not just adapt, it redefined itself. In the 16th century, the Safavid Empire established Shia Islam as the state religion, setting Iran apart from the largely Sunni world around it. This was not just a religious decision, but a reset of identity. From this point on, Iran was no longer just a land with a long past. It became a distinctly defined entity, with a unique identity that continues to this day. And then, history repeated itself again. In the 20th century, Iran entered a completely different kind of transformation: modernization. Under the Pahlavi dynasty, the country attempted to reshape itself along Western lines, from education and economy to social structure. For a moment, it seemed as though Iran was moving away from its past, stepping into a more modern future. But this rapid transformation created deep tensions beneath the surface. And once again, everything collapsed. In 1979, the Islamic Revolution erupted, overthrowing the entire existing system. But this was not a return to the past, nor a continuation of modernization. It was another form of rebirth, a new system that combined elements of a modern state with religious authority. Once again, Iran did not choose one path over the other. It created something entirely new from their conflict. Looking at this pattern, one thing becomes clear. Iran does not develop in the conventional sense. It does not move forward in a stable, linear way. Instead, it is repeatedly pushed to its limits and then forced to transform. And it is precisely these moments of rupture, these apparent collapses, that have allowed Iran to continue to exist. At every stage of its history, Iran has been shaped not only by transformation, but by constant tension. These tensions are not temporary disruptions. They are persistent forces that define how the country evolves. Rather than moving toward a stable equilibrium, Iran exists in a continuous state of negotiation between opposing ideas, values, and pressures. It is within these ongoing conflicts that its identity is tested, challenged, and ultimately reshaped. One of the most enduring conflicts lies within Iranian society itself, the tension between tradition and modernity. On one side are deeply rooted cultural and religious structures that emphasize continuity, authority, and collective identity. On the other side are forces pushing for change, urbanization, education, globalization, and new generations seeking different ways of living. This is not a simple divide, but a layered and evolving struggle, where both sides influence each other without fully overcoming the other. Alongside this internal dynamic is a long-standing external conflict. Iran's relationship with outside powers, particularly in the modern era, has been marked by suspicion, resistance, and confrontation. From foreign interventions in its political system to ongoing geopolitical tensions, the country has often positioned itself in opposition to external influence. This has reinforced a sense of independence, but also contributed to isolation and pressure from the global system. There is also a deeper, more abstract conflict, one centered on identity itself. Iran is simultaneously ancient and modern, religious and political, inward-looking and globally connected. These overlapping identities do not always align, creating a constant need to redefine what the nation represents at any given moment. This is not a problem that can be solved once and for all. It is an ongoing condition. What makes these conflicts significant is that they do not weaken Iran in a straightforward way. Instead, they act as forces of tension that drive change. The country does not resolve its contradictions, it lives within them. And it is precisely this state of continuous tension that has shaped Iran into what it is today. Throughout its long history, Iran has not changed gradually, but through a series of decisive turning points, moments when the existing order could no longer sustain itself and was forced to give way to something new. These were not simply events, they were ruptures that reset the direction of the entire civilization. Each turning point marked the end of one structure and the beginning of another, often under conditions of crisis, conflict, or external pressure. One of the earliest and most transformative turning points came with the Arab conquest in the 7th century. The fall of the Achaemenid Empire did not just remove a ruling dynasty, it dismantled an entire political and religious system that had defined Persia for centuries. Zoroastrianism, once the dominant belief system, was gradually replaced by Islam, and the region became part of a much larger Islamic world. At first, this seemed like a complete break from the past. Yet over time, something more complex emerged. Persian culture adapted, reasserting itself within this new framework, shaping Islamic civilization even as it was shaped by it. This moment did not erase Iran, it forced it to evolve. Centuries later, another decisive shift occurred with the rise of the Safavid Empire in the early 16th century. This was a turning point not only in political terms, but in identity. By establishing Twelver Shia Islam as the official state religion, the Safavids fundamentally redefined what it meant to be Iranian. In a region largely dominated by Sunni powers, this choice created a distinct religious and political boundary that continues to influence the country's position in the world today. It was a deliberate act of differentiation, an effort to unify the population under a shared identity that was both spiritual and political. In the modern era, the 1953 coup represents another critical turning point. With the overthrow of Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh, supported by foreign powers, many Iranians began to view external influence as a direct threat to their sovereignty. This event deepened mistrust toward the West and reshaped the internal political landscape. It also set the stage for future unrest, as tensions between authority and popular will continued to grow beneath the surface. That tension ultimately erupted in 1979 with the Islamic Revolution, perhaps the most defining turning point in modern Iranian history. This was not simply a change of leadership, but a complete restructuring of the state. The monarchy was replaced with an Islamic republic, combining elements of modern governance with religious authority. What makes this moment especially significant is that it did not represent a simple return to tradition, nor a continuation of modernization. It was a new synthesis, created out of the failure of both. The Iran-Iraq War that followed in the 1980s further solidified this new system. Faced with an external threat, the country was forced to unify under its new identity, reinforcing both political control and national cohesion. The war was devastating, but it also strengthened the structures that had emerged from the revolution, embedding them more deeply into the fabric of society. Each of these turning points reveals a consistent pattern. Iran does not drift into change, it is pushed into it. Crisis forces transformation, and transformation redefines the system. Yet despite these repeated resets, something persists beneath the surface. The form changes, the structure shifts, but the continuity remains. These moments of rupture are not breaks in history. They are the mechanisms through which Iran continues to exist. Modern Iran is no longer an ancient empire, but it is not a typical modern nation either. It exists in a unique state, a political system built in 1979 that is still operating in a world that has completely changed. At the center of that system is the authority of the supreme leader, a structure that is not only political, but ideological. While there are elections, a government, and state institutions, the most critical decisions remain concentrated within a deeper layer of power that is far more difficult to change. Yet beneath that system, Iranian society is moving in a very different direction. This is a young country, with a generation that has grown up with the internet, social media, and global connectivity. They do not see the world the way the revolutionary generation of 1979 did. They want more: opportunity, freedom, and the ability to shape their own lives. And this is where a gap begins to emerge, not as a clear confrontation, but as a growing misalignment between the system and society. That gap is no longer theoretical. In recent years, it has surfaced through repeated waves of protests. What often begins as economic frustration, currency devaluation, rising inflation, and increasing cost of living, quickly expands into broader expressions of dissatisfaction with the system itself. What matters is not just that protests happen, but that they keep happening, again and again, suggesting that the issue is not a single event, but something structural beneath the surface. The response of the system reveals another reality. This is not a structure that changes easily. Measures such as crackdowns, restrictions on communication, and control over information flows show that power is maintained through both authority and enforcement. At times, even access to the internet has been heavily limited, isolating society from the outside world as a way to contain unrest and manage internal stability. At the same time, Iran faces increasing economic and geopolitical pressure. Long-standing sanctions, regional tensions, and recent developments have placed significant strain on the economy. High inflation, unemployment, and rising living costs are directly affecting everyday life. These pressures do not exist in isolation. They interact with social and political tensions, intensifying the overall sense of instability. And yet, despite pressure from both within and beyond its borders, the system has not collapsed. It contracts, adapts, and continues to function. This is what makes modern Iran particularly distinctive. It is not static, but it does not change in the way many expect. It moves, but within limits. And this is the central paradox of Iran in 2026. A society that is changing faster than ever, constrained by a system designed not to change. A country stepping into the future while still carrying the structures of its past. Iran is not standing still, it is constantly in motion, yet never fully able to break away from itself. If we look at Iran's entire journey, what remains is not a story of simple rise or decline, but a series of unresolved contradictions. Iran is not a single, unified entity, but a place where opposing forces coexist, and it is precisely this coexistence that defines it. Iran is one of the oldest civilizations in the world, yet it operates within a modern reality shaped by rapid change. It carries thousands of years of history, yet it is driven by a young generation looking toward the future. On one side lies memory, tradition, and religion. On the other, technology, globalization, and new values. These forces do not cancel each other out. They collide, overlap, and are forced to exist together. But this is the key point. Iran does not try to resolve these contradictions. It lives within them. The political system attempts to preserve an older order, while society continues to evolve. People adapt, adjust, and find ways to exist within these limits. There is no clear equilibrium, only an ongoing state of negotiation. And here, a deeper truth emerges. Iran survives not because it is stable, but because it is never fully stable. It does not collapse in the conventional sense, because each time it is pushed to its limits, it transforms in order to continue. Contradiction is not a problem to be solved. It is the system itself. Iran is not a country that can be explained by a single definition. It is both past and present, both religious and political, both closed and open. And precisely because it cannot be simplified, it continues to exist. Perhaps the greatest paradox of all is this. Iran does not endure despite its contradictions. It endures because of them. After tracing the long and complex journey of Iran, from ancient empires to its modern form, you might find that what stays with you is not just the history itself, but the questions it leaves behind. Iran is not a story with a clear beginning and end, nor is it a place that can be easily defined. It is something that continues to evolve, shaped by forces that often move in opposite directions. And that raises a question that goes beyond history. How does a society move forward when it is still deeply connected to its past? If you were placed somewhere within this timeline, where would you stand? Would you be part of the ancient world, helping build one of the first great empires? Would you live through the moments of transformation, adapting to new systems and beliefs? Or would you find yourself in modern Iran, navigating the tension between tradition and change? Each period offers a different perspective, and each choice reveals something about how we understand progress, identity, and stability. More importantly, what do you think comes next? Iran has never followed a simple path, and its future may not follow one either. Will it continue to adapt, as it has done for thousands of years? Will its internal tensions lead to another major transformation? Or will it find a way to balance its past and present in a more stable form? There is no single answer, but that is exactly what makes the story compelling. Take a moment to reflect on what stood out to you the most. Was it the resilience of its identity, the scale of its transformations, or the contradictions that define it today? Share your thoughts, your perspective, or even your questions. Because history becomes more meaningful when it turns into a conversation, one where different viewpoints can exist side by side, just like the many layers of Iran itself. And if this journey made you curious, there is always more to explore. Every civilization carries its own paradox, its own pattern of rise, change, and survival. So where should we go next? Another empire? Another turning point? Or another story that challenges how we see the world today? Let your curiosity guide the next step.